Welcome YouTube, tiny house people and gardeners wherever you may be. It's time to show you a quick video of what we're doing to prepare for this spring garden. You've probably seen our tiny house garden, and hopefully you've enjoyed some of the videos we've put out on that. And now it's time to plant, of course, mainly pre-plant peppers and tomatoes for transplant out later. So we're talking about growing seedlings here. Now what you're seeing here is an arrow garden. I'm not selling arrow gardens. Fact is, my wife picked this up for free at the end of an estate sale, along with a big tote full of all the extras, extra light bulbs, plugs. I don't know if you know much about how the arrow garden works, but it comes with these little plugs, and you just kind of stick them in here to the arrow garden, and you grow your plants out of those. The light's adjustable. It has a water pump in it. Anyway, it's kind of a neat little setup, and she got it for free, and that's the way I recommend you get yours. So what else can you do with an arrow garden, though? The thing about the arrow garden is it does have limitations. Obviously it's very small, but we have a small garden right now, so we don't need a whole lot. But as you can see, it only has 7 places there. Now you can expand the arrow garden, and we do have expansion things that came in this big tote of stuff she got for free. But it's just not enough for what we need for our garden. So what we're going to do here is show you what we did in order to combine a couple of things together to make this a little more adaptable to our needs. So what I did was I took a couple of balls of tape, and I just basically put them down here, and this is just to keep the heating pad from slipping. Now what I did was I grabbed a heating pad. This is just an old heating pad, one of those things that you lay on when you're not feeling well or when your muscles are achy. That's all it is. It's just a regular old heating pad. And I just popped that into place here. Now the reason I did this is because peppers, especially, not so much tomatoes. Tomatoes require a little bit of warmth to germinate, but peppers are kind of picky. They really like to have the higher temperatures, say around 75 to 85 degrees, in order to germinate. Well, most people's houses here in the Midwest of the United States in the wintertime, the temperatures do vary quite a bit. You know, sometimes in the dead of night or something, your temperatures may get down into, you know, even the lower 60s sometimes. And then, of course, during the daytime, it's not so hard to keep the house warm. But you'd have to spend a ton of money to keep the temperature, say, right at 75 degrees or even 80 degrees, even if you wanted it that hot in the wintertime. So most people here just don't do that because it's a waste of money and a waste of energy. So I just got a regular heating pad. This one's kind of wimpy, so you don't have to worry about it. If you're going to use a heating pad, a medical heating pad for this purpose, first of all, make sure it doesn't get wet. Okay, and number 2 is make sure it doesn't get too hot for the plants, because these things can get really hot. This is kind of a wimpy one, and on the lowest setting, it's pretty much just about right for this. And I put the balls of tape there just so it won't slip. Okay, and then what I did was I grabbed a tray, and this is another thing my wife found for free. A friend that knows she likes to garden had this lying around and didn't want it, so she gave it to her. And it's really kind of a neat little system. And this was put out by Park Seed, and Park Seed's a reputable company. Now, for those of you who are really into heirloom seeds, Park has a history of being more into the hybridized side of things, but they do have some heirloom seeds. But it's generally, if you're kind of a conventional gardener, then Park Seeds are really a good, reliable company. But this is a system that has, and I don't know if you can see it here, let me just put it here into place, and I put a couple of balls of tape underneath that too to make sure that doesn't slip. And you'll see this little tray, and this little tray is probably about 9 or 10 inches by maybe about 18 inches, 16 to 18 inches. So it fits just perfect here on top of this arrow garden. And it has round holes in a styrofoam floater, and so this is almost like a Kratky method sort of thing in a way, because it's kind of a floating raft, and you just keep about 1/4 to a 1/2 inch of water in there. Okay, and it comes with these little plugs. Now these plugs, this is part of a bag. My wife got this bag for free with it from her friend, and these little plugs, let me pull out one here that's kind of a good example. these plugs they just look just like this. I mean, they're square, but they're also tapered, but they're long so that they get down into the water, and you can see how that would work. Now, we're kind of far away here, so what I'm going to do is just zoom in a little bit so you can kind of see things hopefully a little clearer. I do apologize for the nifty camera work, but hey, you know, that's the way it goes. You're getting what you're paying for, and you're not paying anything. So we do things cheap around here, but that's good, because that means it's cheap for you too. So it's a little, and it fits in these round holes. And because there's a space between the round hole and this square plug, then there's root pruning. And for those that don't know what root pruning is, when roots become exposed, when they're reaching out through the soil or the pot, and they reach a point where there's air, then what happens is they stop, and they'll either form a oxygen root, or they'll just go in a different direction. If they don't need more oxygen, if they need more water, they'll just go down further, and it causes the roots to grow down much deeper, and it also causes them to not become root bound, which is very important. If you've ever pulled up a plant that's been in a pot for a year or two, it's just all a solid root mass, and that's not really good for the plants. So this works very well. It's an automatic watering system as well as being a root pruning. It's a great way to start your seedlings. And so what we did, it's been about 2 weeks now. And so these little seedlings that we'll zoom in on here a little bit closer in a moment are the tomato seedlings. The left half here is tomato seedlings, or the left, probably third, is tomato seedlings, and the right 2/3 are hot pepper seedlings. Okay, and they're just now starting to come up, and that's the reason I decided maybe it's time to do a quick review of what we're doing here. Now, when we first started this, of course, we wanted to keep the moisture in as much as possible, and when seeds are germinating, it's not important to have the light on. It really doesn't bother the seeds. As long as they don't dry out, as long as the soil, or the plug in this case, doesn't dry out. And so what we did was we had this dome, and this came with this, had a little hole in it, but I plugged it with some greenhouse repair tape. And so we had this dome on top of here, and that helped keep the moisture in. And then I also had just an old bath mat that I used to kind of cover it up to keep it warmer, especially at night. And then of course I had the option of using the heating mat on and off a little bit, but I didn't want to use too much power to do it. So that's kind of the setup that we've got going now. The Aero Garden normally pumps water all the time when you have the system on, so that you can turn on the light. And all I did was take the pump unit off and put a little piece of electrical tape back there to block the circuit. And so it flashes that there's low water in the tank, but that's because there's no water in the tank, because I'm not running the pump right now. All I'm really wanting is the light from the Aero Garden. That's what the Aero Garden function is in all this at the moment, is just to provide this light. And this light is very adjustable, so that we can take the light, and I had it up here a little bit for the purpose of showing this video, but you could adjust the light and bring it all the way down, which is really what you should do, is bring it all the way down, because you want the light to be as intense without burning the plants. You don't want to touch the plants with the light, but as you want it to be as intense as possible. That'll cause the little seedlings to thicken up and to become stout and sturdy and strong, rather than becoming just long and spindly. Now, we also have the other ingredient that you have to have, obviously, besides water, nutrients, light, intense light, is you also have to have airflow. So right here you can see we have a fan. Now, I don't have it set up and going right now because it just makes more sound that could interfere with the video. So it's off right now. I'll turn it on before we get done here, and you can see how it works. But if you've ever had the chance to, even on what it feels like a breezeless day or a windless day, if you've got little seedlings that are planted outside, just get down real close to them and look at them. And what you'll see is that when the wind is on them, in fact, why don't I just go ahead and turn that on now. What I'll do is I'll zoom in, and I will wait for this to focus. There we go. You can see the little seedlings. Those are tomato seedlings. And I'll explain a little bit more about what we're doing. Hopefully that'll be a good example. And let me just turn the fan on. And you'll see that the little seedlings are shaking. That's actually good for them. Now, as long as you keep the soil, or the plugs in this case, moist, they won't dry out. They'll be just fine. And if you were out on that windless day that I was talking about earlier, and you get down there, even though you don't feel any breeze, you might not feel any breeze on your skin, you will see the little seedlings shaking, kind of like this. And that's it's just the way the natural system outdoors is set up in order to provide the plants with what they need. Also, if we zoom in a little bit more here on a certain spot, you will see, and I apologize for the camera work. Hopefully it'll focus in here in a little bit. It just takes this camera is not the world's fastest focusing camera, but you can see right there, that's actually the loop of a little seedling from a hot pepper that's about to come up. Now you may have noticed that we do have more than one tomato plant coming up in most of these plugs. There's a total of 18 plugs that we devoted to tomato plants. Right now only 17 have come up. I think the last one will come up. The seeds are pretty viable. They're just kind of late. There's already other little tomato plants, coming up from some of the plugs still. So I think we will get a tomato plant in each plug. But we just have not yet trimmed. And what we'll do is we'll take a tiny pair of scissors and very carefully cut the ones we don't want out of each plug, so that there's only one tomato plant in each plug. And we'll do the same thing with the pepper plants when they come up. I did plant anywhere from 3 to 4 or 5 seeds in each one. These are older seeds, and I wasn't exactly sure how well they would germinate. It does look like we're going to get all the peppers up. We've gotten all the tomatoes up. Peppers are a little bit harder to germinate. That's why, again, I have the heat mat there to help along the temperature part of that, so that we will end up trimming those down to where we only have one plant per plug, regardless of whether it's a pepper or tomato. You know, there have been times when I have store-bought plants and also planted out regular seeds. And the seeded seed plants, the ones grown from seed, will literally catch up with, and sometimes even, depending on the variety, even surpass the size of the ones that I bought that were, say, I don't know, maybe if they were 4 inches tall, maybe the ones that come up from the seed, they'll actually surpass and outperform the ones bought from the store. And it's not that the ones in the store are bad plants, but just two things. Number one is they go through a root shock experience, most of them, and that slows them down and greatly retards their growth and their getting established and producing. And number two is they've been hyped up on chemicals and fertilizers and things like that, and when you put them in the ground, they're going to have a difficult time because they've been babied, okay, and they've been used to having it really, really easy. And it's just like having, make sure you have the wind blowing on them. They need to have a little tough so that they respond and produce better. So you don't want to be too hard on them. You don't want to be too easy on them. You want to find that nice happy medium. So I just thought you might want to know what we're doing to prepare to have plants to put out in the garden. A lot of things we will direct seed. We'll direct seed things like zucchini and squash, and we already have things out there like strawberries and asparagus and garlic. And there's a lot of things we will be having an update on the peas probably before too long that we planted out earlier in a previous video, and to show you what's going on there. But we planted these in the plugs on the 24th of February, and it's now the Gregorian month of March, and so it's about the 7th or so. So we are looking there again at about 2 weeks more or less. So that's the growth you've seen from the tomatoes and also the peppers. Now, tomatoes usually come up in about 7 to 10 days from the time that you plant the seeds. Peppers often take much longer. It's usually about the time the tomatoes are done coming up, the peppers really start coming up. So the tomatoes again are 7 to 10 days. Usually about 14 to 21 days is usually my experience with the pepper plants. So they're just now coming up, as you saw from the little one popping up there that I showed you earlier. So I just thought you might want to see what we were doing, and hope that is helpful. If it gives you any ideas, or if you have any comments or suggestions, just one other thing just popped into my head. As far as the water's concerned, people might want to know if there's like nutrients in the water. The only nutrients we put in the water is we put in a little bit of food grade hydrogen peroxide, and that's not so much to be a nutrient as it is to kill fungal growth and to kind of sterilize the thing so that you don't have too much mold. Now, we did do something that I would do a little differently now, and that is the part plugs, the ones I showed you that are square that go in the little holes there. They recommend that you soak them in warm water, tepid water, for at least a half an hour to get this little. They call them sponges. They're kind of it's kind of like a sponge, kind of like peat type of material. But what happens is that I would do it differently now. I would have put hydrogen peroxide in that water too, and the reason why is because those sponges also can spawn mold or spores, and you want to keep those down too. So what we've had to do is we've had to initially water with a little bit of the food grade hydrogen peroxide in the water in order to keep the mold down while the seeds are sprouting. And it's pretty cheap to buy, so it's a good little investment, and the plants really do seem to like it. So maybe it does add some nutrient to the value to the water. I'm not 100% sure about that, but the plants like it. So hope that is helpful for you, and until next time, have a productive day, and we'll see you then.